film or series lit your fuse and made you have to tell stories on screen?
So I have two answers. I have one's a film, one's a series. The film is The Wiz, and it is literally the first memory that I have of watching any movie. There's a lot of debate about, is The Wiz a great movie? Is it just beloved? What is it? But you have to understand the impact of seeing an all-black fantasy world that sounded like Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson music on a very small child was really intense. And the older I get, the more I realize how formative that experience was. Like when I finally saw The Wizard of Oz, like I had seen The Wiz first, so I didn't understand that this was a black-centric cinematic universe was something that was a given for me as a very small child. And I just remembered being amazed by it and watching it over and over again as a kid. And then as I grew up, I didn't really have language for what I was so excited by, but I knew that when I came home from a movie theater, nothing made me feel that way. And I wasn't very good at drawing, but I was always trying to like visually tell stories to try to like tap into that energy that I felt in the movie theater. And one day I'm watching the X-Men cartoon series, which was incredibly formative for me as a child. And it's the first time I really watched the credits. And I remember seeing those first credits, you know, executive producer, director. And I was like, it's one of those. I think it's one of those that I want to be. I grew up in a family with no connection to the arts. You know, we had no like people in Hollywood. I literally didn't even know there was a job title for what I wanted to do. But once I saw that there was a word for it, director, there was nothing else I was interested in doing. than becoming one.
As I recall, you crowdfunded Dear White People and won, you know, a breakthrough grand jury prize, breakthrough artist in 2014. When you were making your way up as a filmmaker, what movie or series did you watch that was so good it made you think, wow, can I play in this sandbox? Can I rise to this level?
It's 2001. It's a movie I hated growing up because I didn't get it. I didn't get the hoopla for it. And in college and film, I'd watched it six or seven times because it's the movie that you're supposed to love. And then in college, I took this philosophy class. We talked about all of these different, you know, basically the evolution of philosophical thought and meaning and existentialism and all that stuff. And really without preparing us for it, the professor put on 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I finally understood so many things that Kubrick was trying to discover, explore in that film, but he was doing so really without dialogue or with as little dialogue as possible. And I realized this is pure cinema. And I had a religious experience watching that film. I mean, I really did. I felt like I can't really put it into words, but it just clicked, like cathected, like in a moment with that movie. And I watch it all the time just to remember what's possible. I don't know how a movie like that gets made today, by the way, but it's my gold standard for sure. It operates in ways that absolutely you're not allowed to do in Hollywood or at that budget level. I think the most like specific the dialogue gets is people talking about like sandwiches or something, but like it tells you really what cinema can do and how cinema can like create an unconscious, subconscious, spiritual experience in an audience. And it always reminds me of the power of movies. So I don't know if I'll ever get to make my 2001 or not, but that's the one I watched to remember what's possible.
Was there a specific moment or sequence in 2001 that just hit you hardest and just left the most indelible impression on you as to what cinema could do?
It's the Stargate sequence, of course. It's when he has defeated Hal, both with compassion and with force of will. Nobody else in the movie has figured out how to do it. It's like you're either like a violent monster in the movie, or you're so calm and relaxed that like you're almost like a robot yourself. And Dave Poole figures out how to do both at the same time. And then he's sort of adrift in space, and you see all the celestial bodies lining up, and then you go into the Stargate. And you can't understand that moment in the film really intellectually. And it was kind of the first time it dawned on me that the most powerful experiences in cinema aren't ones that you can actually put into words. And it takes the whole movie for that to mean anything to you, that sequence. So it's cumulative, you know, it's a lot of things that build up to that moment, but him sort of, going into the Stargate and ending up in that weird, is it a museum? Is it where he sort of ages to death? That is, that's like in my bones, how great that moment is.
So now, whether it was the success of your own work or approval from someone whose opinion really mattered to you, what first gave you the confidence that you did belong?
My first movie, Dear White People, there's a lot of cinematic quotes in that movie. I'm visually quoting a lot of different filmmakers. And of course, one of the ones that was frankly still alive and let me know that I could be an artist and tell Black stories, of course, is Spike Lee. And there was a moment when he invited me to talk with one of his class at NYC, and he played my movie for the class, and it was really. He sat next to me and laughed at the movie and was like, "Oh, is that you quoting Do the Right Thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." He's like, "Oh my God!" It was like a really like. This is my hero, and he's not only just accepting me, but he's putting my work in front of his students. That was a pretty big edifying moment for me. I mean, Spike is sort of like, one of the few heroes that not only did it, but did it at such a big level that's still here. That was a big one.
What would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to allow you to turn these projects that influenced you into your own language as a filmmaker?
I think that, people call it imposter syndrome. I don't know if it's just that, but I'm a person of difference. I'm gay and I'm Black, and I'm in a very white, heteronormative industry that has a veneer of liberalism. And so remembering that you belong in the room and that you are a voice of authority and that your opinion is what got you here and that's what they're paying you to give, and not sort of just doing what maybe my nervous system tells me to do to just survive the moment, but to find a way to be myself in the moment. I mean, that's probably like a lifelong journey, but that's the big one for me. Taking up space maybe is the better way to put it. Like, how do I take up space in these places that nobody looks like me? And everyone kind of maybe has an idea of what I am before I walk in the room, before I can speak for myself. Overcoming that and shyness around that, I think that's been a big one. I think it's what makes any artist kind of come alive. And the thing about me, though, is it's sort of like I walk in the room, you're like, okay, this guy's got something different. It sort of precedes me a little bit. But I don't know that I would have it any other way.
Well, I have 3 kids, and we've been on the Haunted Mansion ride in Orlando. I can't even tell you how many times. We love that.
Yeah.
We love that attraction. How did that attraction grab you, and what burned in you to turn this into a narrative film?
It was the script that Katie Dipple wrote, without a doubt, because I loved the ride too. My mom took me to Disney World when I was a kid. I toured Disney World as a kid, part of something called a show choir, the Longfellow Elementary Show Choir. I worked at Disneyland during film school. So I was already obsessed beyond belief with that ride. And also just the cinema of Disneyland and Disney World. It's cinema. You're walking through cinema. You're walking through production and costume design and lighting, period. That's why it's so effective, and acting and performances. And so I was already obsessed. But I didn't, it's tricky to turn something like that into a movie that also, checks all the boxes, all the quadrants. Everyone's having fun. There's set pieces, but it's also a great movie. That's a hard thing to do. And when I got the script, I was like, oh, Katie Dippold already did that. And I know how to tell that story because what she did is she created an ensemble comedy with like these genre flourishes. But at the end of the day, it's a real story. It's a real movie about a character moving through grief, and particularly a character that's very sarcastic and what I would call shady, which is kind of how I move through the world. I have a very like kind of dry look on things and way of talking about things. I just really related to the guy at the center of her movie. And I felt very protective of it, to be honest with you. She really did so much of the heavy lifting of figuring out a way to get inside the mansion, that everyone can sort of get on a journey, that that deep hardcore fans could get in, but also people who maybe saw the Eddie Murphy version of the movie or never saw any version of this movie, like would also like enjoy. I just felt like she did that, and I wanted to protect that as best I could, you know, in the crucible of a studio experience.
On the one hand, it's always good to have a brand to lean on because people are going to be curious to see what the movie is like. But at the same time, it can also be a high bar, you know, because people may have their own expectations. Is there something that you carried away from the attraction that you wanted to make sure was in this movie?
There's a lot of things. I philosophically was the place I always start. And the thing about that ride, why it continues to be so effective, even, you know, as I've become an adult, is that it's a practical effects sort of, you know, display. It is literally smoke and mirrors, like Pepper's ghost effect, smoke and mirrors, like 1800 style, what some might call chintzy effects. That is its charm. And, you know, not knowing how they pulled the trick off, but knowing that they pulled the trick off, but you can't just say, oh, it was just a screen or it was just digital. Or that was a philosophy that I carried into the film that was really important to me. And the way that shook out is we had to build the mansion. We had to build our interiors. There had to be a giant connected mansion set for everybody to walk around because I didn't want people walking around a bunch of CGI sets. I wanted practical elements for all of the special effects. I wanted my ghost to be there in makeup, interacting with the cast. I wanted to hang people from wires and do all those tricks, those in-camera tricks that, of course, we're going to sweeten and we're going to bring, you know, into the modern era. But there's got to be a sense that like it's there, but it's not, for you to kind of sink into the reality of something so kooky as the Haunted Mansion. That was, I'm very proud of that because that was a big part of it for me. And then the other thing was that wasn't really in it's, you know, it's in New Orleans. It literally is situated in New Orleans Square. But other than that, my family is from Louisiana. New Orleans is a very black city, and I'm obsessed with it as an artist because jazz came from New Orleans and everything comes from jazz. And, you know, I have a cousin that collects art from the sort of black Creole upper class that had to leave New Orleans, you know, when segregation took hold. And I was like, I want to bring the blackness of all of that to it, because if you do that right, you get this wonderful blend of spooky and funny and grief and joy and all the things that kind of the ride is giving already, but could really connect authentically to the culture there. Those were the big pillars of my pitch, honestly, to Disney, is I want this to feel like it really exists in a place and time so that we can take, you know, an audience on a really wild journey and have it be rooted in something.